Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
And, today we're really looking at two true crime cases that I think are going to stick with you.
Oh, absolutely.
And they're both just incredible examples of resilience in the face of just unimaginable tragedy.
Yeah, I think what's really fascinating about what we're going to explore today is not just the crimes themselves,
Right.
but, looking at the long-term impact on the victims and their families and how they navigate that road to healing and justice.
Yeah, and it's interesting how different those roads can be.
Yeah.
In one case, it's about immediate survival.
Right.
That raw courage to fight for your life.
Yeah.
And in the other, it's a decades-long pursuit of truth, a refusal to let go even when hope seems lost.
And that's really, I think, what makes these cases so compelling.
Yeah.
They challenge our understanding of resilience, and they highlight the different forms that it can take.
Okay, so let's unpack this.
Okay.
First up, we have the story of Jamie Kloss, a 13-year-old who was kidnapped in Wisconsin back in 2018. This is a case that I think, gripped the nation.
It did. It's a stark reminder of the evil that exists in the world, but also a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit.
Yeah, let's start with the facts.
Okay.
Jamie's parents, Denise and James Kloss, were murdered in their home. And Jamie was abducted, and she was held captive for 88 days by her captor, Jake Patterson, in a remote cabin.
And, it's important to note that authorities initially had very few leads.
Yeah.
This case was a puzzle with seemingly no pieces to fit.
And what's remarkable is that Jamie didn't just wait for rescue.
Right.
She actively looked for a chance to escape.
Her captor made a critical mistake. He left her alone one day,
Oh, wow.
thinking she was too terrified to flee.
Right.
But Jamie seized that opportunity.
Think about the courage that took.
Right.
She was 13 years old,
Yeah.
facing an unknown world outside that cabin.
Mm-hmm.
But she was determined to get back to her family and her life.
And her escape was daring, almost cinematic. She managed to make her way to a nearby road where she encountered a woman walking her dog.
Can you imagine being that woman, Jean Nutter?
Yeah.
Just out for a walk and you come face to face with a missing girl,
You're right.
realizing instantly the gravity of the situation.
And it speaks volumes about the power of ordinary people to act decisively in extraordinary moments.
Yeah.
Jean's immediate response was crucial.
Absolutely.
She recognized Jamie,
Right.
got her to safety, and contacted the authorities.
Her actions directly led to Patterson's arrest, bringing an end to Jamie's terrifying ordeal.
Yeah,
It makes you wonder, how would you react in a situation like that?
right.
Would you have the presence of mind to do the right thing?
It's a question we should all ask ourselves.
Yeah.
But the story doesn't end there. It's important to examine the community response to Jamie's return.
Right, because this wasn't just a case of, she's back, case closed.
Right.
The community really rallied around Jamie.
And they did it in a way that went beyond just sympathy. They understood that Jamie needed more than just words of comfort. She needed tangible support to rebuild her life.
Exactly. The community provided counseling services.
Right.
They organized fundraising events, and they created safe spaces where Jamie could reconnect with her friends and family.
Yeah.
They understood that healing from this kind of trauma is a long process, and they were committed to being there for her every step of the way.
What's interesting here is that the community recognized that supporting Jamie wasn't just about helping her individually.
Yeah.
It was about reaffirming their collective values of compassion and resilience.
Right.
It was about sending a message that they wouldn't be defined by this tragedy, but by their response to it.
Now, while Jamie's story is about surviving the immediate aftermath of a horrific crime,
Yeah.
our next case delves into a different kind of resilience, one that unfolds over decades.
This case takes us back to 1969
Wow.
and highlights the enduring power of hope and the unwavering pursuit of justice.
That's right. Let's shift gears now and travel back in time to Tewksbury, Massachusetts. This is where we meet John McCabe, a 15-year-old boy whose life was tragically cut short, leaving his family to grapple with a devastating loss and a mystery that would haunt them for years to come.
Absolutely. John vanished after attending a dance one evening, and his body was discovered a few days later.
Oh.
And the initial investigation failed to identify his killer.
So for John's parents, Bill and Evelyn McCabe, this wasn't just about the grief of losing a child,
Right.
but also that agonizing uncertainty of not knowing who was responsible or why.
Imagine living with that kind of unresolved trauma.
Yeah.
that open wound of unanswered questions.
Right.
But Bill and Evelyn refused to let the case go cold. They dedicated themselves to finding justice for John no matter how long it took.
And this is where we see that different kind of resilience, right?
Exactly.
It's not about physical survival,
Right.
but about the strength to keep fighting, even when the odds seem insurmountable.
Exactly. For decades, Bill and Evelyn kept John's memory alive, pushing law enforcement to revisit the case, organizing vigils, and speaking to anyone who would listen.
Wow.
They refused to let their son become just another unsolved statistic.
It's a testament to the power of a parent's love, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely.
To keep that hope burning for so many years, never giving up on the possibility of finding answers.
And think about the advancements in forensic science during those intervening years.
Yeah.
DNA technology, which was in its infancy back in 1969, became a powerful tool for solving cold cases.
That's a great point. Did advancements in DNA technology play a role in finally cracking the McCabe case?
They absolutely did. In the early 2000s, investigators were finally able to extract DNA evidence from the original crime scene, and in 2011, they got a match, Walter Shelley,
Wow.
a man who was already serving a life sentence for other violent crimes.
So even though Shelley was already behind bars, the McCabe family finally had a name, a face to connect to their son's murder.
Right.
That must have been a huge turning point for them.
It was a pivotal moment after 42 years of waiting.
Gosh.
They finally had the answer they had been seeking.
Right.
But it wasn't just about knowing who did it. It was
Yeah.
about holding that person accountable.
So what happened next was Shelley put on trial for John's murder.
He was, in 2013, Walter Shelley was tried and convicted of John McCabe's murder, giving Bill McCabe, in his 80s at the time, the opportunity to finally face his son's killer in court and deliver a powerful victim impact statement.
I can only imagine the emotions that must have been swirling in that courtroom to finally have that moment of reckoning after so many years of waiting.
And for Bill McCabe, it wasn't about revenge. It was
Right.
about ensuring that John's story was told, that his life so tragically cut short was acknowledged and honored.
It's a powerful example of how justice, even when delayed, can still bring a sense of closure and validation. It reinforces the idea that some truths are worth fighting for no matter how long it takes.
And it's worth noting that the McCabe case is not unique. There are countless other families out there still searching for answers,
Yeah.
still hoping for that one break that will lead them to justice.
And what does that say about the human spirit?
It's truly remarkable.
That even in the face of unimaginable loss and the passage of time, that spark of hope, that desire for truth can endure.
And it challenges us to think about our own understanding of closure.
Yeah.
Is it about punishment? Is it about finding answers? Or is it something more profound, something that transcends the legal system?
It makes you wonder what constitutes true justice. Is it the verdict in a courtroom, or is it something more elusive, something that resides in the hearts of those who have been affected by these tragedies?
These are questions that philosophers have debated for centuries.
Right.
But looking at cases like Jamie's and John's, I think we can glean some insights.
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah.
How do these two stories, so different in their circumstances, connect back to the broader themes of resilience, justice, and community?
Well, if we consider the community response, in both cases we see a fascinating parallel. Okay.
While Jamie's community rallied around her in the immediate aftermath of her escape, providing practical and emotional support,
Right.
John's community, in a way, rallied around his memory,
Yeah.
keeping his story alive for decades.
That's a really interesting observation. So in a way, the community became a repository for their hope, a living testament to their belief that justice would eventually be served.
Precisely. And in both cases, we see the community playing a vital role in the pursuit of justice, whether it's by helping a survivor rebuild her life or by keeping the memory of a victim alive, ensuring that their story is not forgotten.
This raises a really important question for me. If community support is so crucial, how do we as individuals become more active and engaged members of our own communities?
That's a great question, and it's one that I think each of us has to answer for ourselves. But I think it starts with awareness.
Okay.
It's about paying attention to what's happening around us,
Yeah.
recognizing the needs of others, and being willing to step up and offer support even in small ways.
Sometimes those small gestures can make the biggest difference. Absolutely. It could be something as simple as volunteering at a local organization, donating to a cause you believe in, or even just lending a listening ear to someone who's going through a tough time.
It's about recognizing that we're all interconnected and that our actions, however small they may seem, can have a ripple effect within our communities.
And it's not just about reacting to tragedies or crises.
Yeah.
It's about proactively creating a culture of support and compassion in our everyday lives.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into these two compelling cases, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about the victims and their families, about their resilience and their pursuit of justice. But what about the perpetrators? Where do they fit into this conversation about justice and healing?
That's a crucial question that often gets overlooked.
Well,
It's natural to focus on the victims and their journeys, but to fully grasp the complexity of justice, we need to consider the other side of the equation.
right, because in both of these cases, the perpetrators were ultimately brought to justice. Jake Patterson. Jamie's captor was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
And Walter Shelley, convicted of John McCabe's murder, was already serving a life sentence for other crimes when he died in prison in 2019.
So in both cases, there was a sense of accountability, even if it came decades later for the McCabe family. But this is where it gets really interesting, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this. What are your thoughts on the balance between punishment and rehabilitation in our justice system?
That's a question that has challenged societies for centuries.
Yeah.
Is the purpose of our justice system solely to punish wrongdoing, or should it also aim to rehabilitate offenders and offer a path for them to reintegrate into society?
It's a tough question, and I imagine the answer varies depending on the circumstances of each case. Some might argue that individuals like Patterson and Shelley, who committed such horrific acts, are beyond redemption and deserve nothing less than a lifetime behind bars.
There's certainly a valid argument to be made for that perspective. But it also raises the question of whether we as society have a responsibility to at least try to rehabilitate those who have committed crimes.
To help them understand the profound impact of their actions and potentially one day become productive members of society again.
Exactly. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. It's intertwined with our own values, beliefs, and personal experiences.
Right.
But I think these cases provide a valuable framework for examining these questions.
They force us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, the nature of evil, and the very concept of justice.
They do, and while there may not be a single right answer, these cases challenge us to consider the different facets of justice.
Yeah.
Is it about retribution? Is it about deterrence? Or is it about finding a way to heal the wounds inflicted on both individuals and communities?
And how do we balance the need for accountability with the possibility of redemption?
It's a lot to unpack, and I think it goes beyond just the legal system.
I agree, it's a societal conversation we need to be having.
Yeah.
How do we create a system that is both just and humane?
One that acknowledges the pain of victims while also recognizing the potential for human change.
And how do we as individuals contribute to a system that upholds those values?
These are questions worth pondering, not just in the abstract, but in our everyday lives.
Yeah.
How do these stories inform our own actions and interactions within our communities? How do we respond when we encounter injustice? How do we support those who have been harmed? And ultimately, how do we work towards a world where these kinds of tragedies are less likely to occur in the first place?
These are challenging questions, but they're incredibly important. By grappling with them, by thinking critically about the complexities of justice and resilience, we can each play a part in building a more compassionate and equitable world.
And that's a goal worth striving for.
Absolutely. So as we conclude this deep dive, I wanted to leave you with that the stories of Jamie Kloss and John McCabe are not just about crime and punishment. They're about the enduring human spirit, the power of community, and the ongoing pursuit of justice and healing. They're stories that challenge us to think deeply about our own values and how we can contribute to a better world.